Welcome back, friends. Let's do it again. Amazing. Okay, it is my pleasure at this point to welcome Gus Burns back to the stage. One more time for Gus Burns. And his guests from Pleasant Trees, Jerome Crawford and Rick Wershe Jr. Gentlemen, welcome to the stage. Thank you for coming.
All right, well, it's great to be here today. And Rick, we've kind of had cross paths in my past. I was, before becoming the cannabis reporter for MLive in about 2019, I spent a good 8 years in Detroit covering public safety, crime. I think I had probably heard your name before I moved to Detroit, but a lot of the stuff that was going on in your court battle came up then. So we actually, I was surprised one time I had reached out to you in prison, and you granted me an interview, and we did a phone interview, and that was probably the first time we spoke. So it's kind of at the time, I probably never expected that I'd be on a stage with you, you know? So that's pretty cool. And Jerome, you're probably a little less known on this stage. So I guess we'll start off by just having you kind of like hearing people's paths into this industry. So tell me what you're doing now and your role and what led you here.
Absolutely. Gus, thank you for having us. Good still morning, everyone. Jerome Crawford, Director of Legal Operations and Social Equity for Pleasant Trees. In the short form, I'm an attorney, and I've been practicing about a decade, and came in across a variety of industries, a variety of paths, right? Did the big law, silk stocking type of law firm thing, think suits, and then did in-house counsel for different companies, different industries. Automotive, you're in Michigan, of course, a publicly traded company as well. And really got exposed to cannabis through a unique light. My way of in, if you will, to answer your question, Gus, was through the DE&I sort of framework. I've always been one that has done a lot of give back work, a lot of public service work, generally through volunteer organizations, affinity bar associations, you name it, right? Community type of work. This is the first time I was able to sort of blend my day job into that very intentionally. So my role is a bit of a hybrid, unique role in that, in some respects, it's not equal halves, but I am a lawyer, I'm a corporate journalist, part of our now two-man legal team with our chief legal officer, Ben Sobchak, and then beyond that lead all of our social equity initiatives, which the concept of social equity, which we'll unpack a little bit, of course, today, really comes down to bridging the gap, right? You have the war on drugs, the so-called war on drugs, as Rick would say, the war on people in poverty. And what do we do now to try to bridge that gap now that this, of course, is a legalized industry? So I help from our side as a private operator and lead the various initiatives that we do.
All right. And if anyone doesn't know, I mean, there are movies out there about Rick, documentaries.
I've never watched a movie.
No. I've seen the documentary, the movie, and read the book.
I've never read the book from Vince Wade, but I heard it's very good.
So there is a lot of information out there about you, and when you think about the war on drugs, while it didn't deal necessarily with marijuana, it's kind of the same concept.
It dealt with marijuana as well. I met people in prison doing life for marijuana, so don't say it didn't deal with marijuana.
Right.
There was, I'll let you finish.
No, go ahead.
There was a lot of people in federal prison. There's still people in prison today for marijuana. I just spoke to the governor the other day about someone in Michigan. You know, he's doing 5 years and his 7-year-old son has leukemia. There's no need for him to be in prison. You could put an ankle monitor on him and let him stay at home. I mean, God forbid something happens to his 7-year-old kid while he's in prison for a cannabis crime, which our state collects taxes from.
Right. But when I think about going to jail or prison, a lot of times people hear these terms in terms of years. I mean, you did 3 decades plus behind bars, and some marijuana crimes, maybe people aren't doing months, maybe they're doing less than that. But either way, they still have this stigma on their records if they were busted. And obviously, we're making some inroads. The society is making some inroads in that. But could you talk about what you're doing now, since you've gotten out? What has your life path been like since you got out from behind bars, and what are you doing right now with Pleasant Trees and marijuana?
Well, since I've been out, my first passion is helping people that are still in there. So I'm trying to get people out of prison that I believe, everybody might not believe it, but I believe there's tens of thousands of people in prison that shouldn't be in prison. Right. I would say 40 to 50% of the population, you don't need to be in prison. If you look back historically, Gus, like when prisons were initially built, they were built for violent criminals. And as a society, we got away from that and we started mass incarcerating kids that were from inner cities. So every chance I get, I call pharmaceutical companies drug cartels. Since '99, there have been over 500,000 deaths from opioids. We've incarcerated one person. Let's go into the ghettos, right where we're at. Let's see how many little kids. We gave 20 years for an ounce of crack. And trust me, I don't condone it, but an ounce of crack does far less damage than the pills that they prescribe to one person. So it's, you know, not to get off base, but my passion is to try and help people get out of prison that I don't believe belong in prison. So since recently I was able to help get a lady out. She was incarcerated. Here this lady's 60 years old. I knew her boyfriend from the past. When I come home, she's doing 22 to 40 for a nonviolent crime. She did 19 years for a kilo of cocaine and a pound of weed that was in her house. There's no need to incarcerate. I can't imagine, I know what I went through as a man, but I can't imagine, not to sound sexist, what it is like for a woman, you know, to be taken away from her 4 kids. One of her kids is murdered. Now she's out here working with, you know, girls' organizations and trying to do good things. There's just so many people in prison that you could let out that would do good things. They don't need to be behind bars.
So if their goal, if society, the justice system's goal is to deter people from using these drugs or substances, you were there for 3 decades. What do you think it would have taken for someone like yourself to be deterred from
To not go back into the drug business?
Yeah.
Listen, probably after 2 or 3 years, I knew I didn't want to be in prison anymore.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
So
the sentences are so long.
It doesn't. I was just talking to you a minute ago about a friend of mine that was the youngest kid that was ever incarcerated. He's 16 years old. They call him a drug kingpin. They give him a life sentence. They give his older brother a life sentence because his older brother won't tell on him. We just buried his older brother, you know, 53 years old, but he lost 15 years of his life for something he had nothing to do with. To call a 16 or a 17 or a 20-year-old a drug kingpin, I question the mindset of that person, and I wonder how he got to be in the position he's in to put someone in prison for the rest of their life. Like, I think you're totally ignorant to call someone from the inner city a drug. To me, El Chapo, Pablo Escobar, they're drug kingpins. To me, we weren't drug kingpins. We sold drugs, but we weren't drug kingpins.
One of the reasons that marijuana has been successful in becoming legal in states across the nation is the social equity component and the push to right the injustices of the past. And so I think a lot of people in this room probably are interested in that aspect. Some people are in here for the business, some people have a mix of both. But you have actually done some work, and you talked about the efforts you've made towards helping this woman get out of prison. And I've read up that there are still certain people that are still behind bars because of marijuana-related crimes. So what kind of action did you take, and what kind of action can people take if they know of these situations involving inequities with prison, people going to jail?
I think first and foremost, you just, you know, I hope we know all the cases that are still here in Michigan, at least. I hope we know who's still incarcerated for cannabis crimes. I would hope that Dana Nessel is aware of these cases, and from what I understand, they're looking at each and every one of them. But I think the governor should just release them. That's my opinion. You know, I'm not sitting in her seat. That's a big task to take on when you have the unions. You know, I've been in prisons before, Gus. I think when I talked to you, a prison was closing down. And when I left that prison, I'll never forget when we were pulling out on the bus, they were boarding up the gas station and the convenience store. So I don't think people realize the economic impact that a prison has on some of these cities. And therefore, then, you know, these cities, they want these prisons open, and they don't care who's inside. They don't care that you don't belong in the prison. They're trying to sell the guards some gas, cigarettes, and food, and the prison is trying to keep people employed, and that area, in this rural area, and at the same time they're trying to make money. They charge us for every email. They charge us for every phone call. A phone, I get out here, I think my phone's $50 a month, unlimited. In there, I used to spend $2,000 to $3,000 a month on the phone. So who's making that money? Why is a ramen noodle soup 75 cents?
Right. Yeah, and to add a little more color to that, what Rick noted, you mentioned certain people still being incarcerated. So it's an organization many may have heard of called the Last Prisoner Project, right, which is an organization that advocates for the 40,000 plus individuals that are still incarcerated for cannabis-related crimes. 100%. At Pleasant Trees, we believe, I think that's why we, found such synergy with Rick, is that we should never have been illegal in the first place. No one should have ever gone to prison for weed. And we have to stop conflating and blending these issues together about creating a commercialized industry and letting everybody out yesterday. Those are two different issues. And so our work that we try to do, I sum it up in 3 A's. I like the first one Rick already noted, and that's awareness. A lot of people don't have awareness. People think when weed got legalized, everybody got out. Not true, right? Then it's accountability. No operator today is responsible for the war on drugs. However, we believe, and we believe all that if you want to participate in the industry, should take some level of duty or obligation to do something about it, right? We get to do this every day, and that's a benefit and a blessing. But it doesn't mean that those people, as he noted, that got a life sentence or 20 to 40 years, when you sentence people, you sentence their families, you sentence their children for generations to come, so you have to undo a lot of damage from that. And finally, that's the action. The action from us is as a private operator, but as he noted, it takes the government, it takes our regulators, the CRA. All of us have to work together in tandem to try to undo this and bridge that gap.
So, it spans quite a spectrum as far as what governments and accept as legal. Obviously, federally illegal still. Yeah. And our state has probably been shifting a little more than others. We've got, obviously, the public voted for legalization. And you brought up the Last Prisoner Project. I think one of the biggest successes probably within the marijuana industry was the efforts to get Michael Thompson clemency. And he was in prison for marijuana crimes, or the base of his conviction was marijuana crimes. And that, you mentioned Dana Nessel, and obviously Governor Whitmer made that final decision. I was curious though, on you, there was a big long process to get you up, but did you have some of those efforts going on behind the scenes too? And do you see that those efforts have worked? For instance, the woman that you assisted in getting released.
It didn't work in my case. I had to fight. Like if 2 doors closed, we kicked 3 open. My case was a little different than those cases. But did I see it work in Tracy Cowan's case? Absolutely. I think they did a great job of looking at something, seeing that it wasn't fair, and correcting it. And I was able to thank the governor, and to this day, I owe her a debt of gratitude for what she did.
So just being loud and being on social media is a useful way to get these injustices corrected.
Yeah, in the right way. I think social media is a blessing and a curse because it's not regulated. So there's so many things on the internet that aren't true. Sometimes it's hard to decipher what is true. Right. But you always need a platform, and I guess my best advice was, to make sure whatever you put on that platform that you can prove that it's true and correct.
And to further that point, that's why Rick used his platform in a broad sense. All due respect to the Michael Thompsons of the world, right, the Tracy Cowans, there's so many more like them, right, nonviolent, quote-unquote, drug offenders, specifically cannabis-related crimes. So as much as we advocate for that, that person, they become sort of, this landmark situation. Don't forget other people like that, right? And something you noted earlier, Gus, I want to touch back on, which is how do you stop people from going back in? Rick knew early on, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to come back here. Well, recidivism, the reason that's such an issue, a lot of times is employment. People can't find jobs. Well, in our industry, that's not a scarlet letter. It shouldn't be. Someone that's got a cannabis-related conviction. Hell, he might be looking for you, right? You might have some underlying skills that you couldn't put on a resume that make you useful for our industry. So we got to be intentional, I think, about trying to, help people not, end up back there again, and then remove that overall stigma.
So, and that's the social equity component that everyone is talking about, whether it be at the administrative level or within companies or, just the activists within the industry. And so part of your company, Pleasant Trees, their strategy involved getting Rick Wershe on board. So how did that happen, and what is your intent with that relationship, and what's your goal with this relationship, Rick?
kick it off?
My goal is to use my brand to bring awareness. The better my brand does, the more people I can help, the more I can give back. My brand's a brand with a mission about giving back and about helping people. And I want to say something. I don't just support nonviolent crimes for cannabis. I support getting everybody out of prison for nonviolent crimes. Yes. So I don't care if you're in there for cocaine or whatever it is. My opinion, everybody might not agree with me, you don't deserve 20 or 30 years for cocaine. The day I came home, before there ever was a BMF series or all the hoopla going on around it, I wore a Free Big Meat shirt. In my honest opinion, he doesn't deserve 30 years in prison. Just coming out of a prison sentence for 30 years for a drug crime, I know that it's not fair. So I'm going to speak up. I think we're one of the states that lag behind in good time. So I'm supporting the Good Time initiative that's going on right now. In Florida, federal prison and other prison systems, you're able to earn time off of your sentence. But you have to work. You have to do good things. Here, you just sit there, watch TV in your cell. There's no, you don't have to do anything. You could just wait for your sentence to be up.
Let me share a little more about that brand, though, that Rick noted. It's called The Eighth, which is a double entendre purposefully. Of course, eighth in the industry is a standard unit of measurement, an eighth of weed.
Which my brand has nothing to do with that, but the MRA thinks that it does, so, but it doesn't. It's your Eighth Amendment.
It's about the Eighth Amendment, which of course is a prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. The irony is that the entire so-called war on drugs is cruel and unusual punishment. So the purpose of that, and if you see the packaging of the brand, it has the Eighth Amendment printed on the front, the back, is to educate, to raise awareness. You can't advocate for your rights if you don't even know what they are. And one of the things Rick does a lot, we'll go out somewhere, he asks me, do you know your Eighth Amendment? People go, I don't know my government class, maybe I remember the first or second. People don't remember. They don't even know that it's something that our government technically, in many ways, in our criminal justice system has been infringing upon for decades. So the purpose of that brand is it's a brand with a mission to raise awareness and help educate people around there. And again, it's beyond just cannabis, right? It's anywhere where you've been cruelly, unusually punished, and truly has happened in our incarceration and how we've, criminalized weed over years.
In the past, people didn't necessarily think it was as cruel and unusual as we do today, obviously considering your sentence. But I guess I'm wondering that when people get out of prison, it's difficult to get jobs. There's the kind of that fallout, and you're in a position where you were able to now make a career in this industry. What can people in this industry do to assist? I mean, what are the things that people are going to be doing in the social equity realm that they're not doing?
So one thing I'll talk a little bit about our social equity plan. And again, this is by way of example. We do not have all the answers all figured out. And our mindset is we have no problem creating a, quote, arms race of social equity, if you will, because more people get blessed. That's how it should be, right? Everybody should be pushing toward this goal. All private operators, our regulators, CRA, government elected officials. So our plan is very simple, a four-point plan with 4 pillars. The first one is the one you're talking about, is access to value chain. So for us, that's low-hanging fruit. We create jobs, right? Beginning of the pandemic, we're 30-some employees. We're about 250 now. So rather than going just in LinkedIn and Indeed, which are inherently biased, right? Find ways to work in communities like we open our Mount Clemens location.
How do you make sure those 250 jobs are filled by people that were negatively impacted?
You literally have to be intentional. So by way of example, our Mount Clemens store that we just opened in the old Gibraltar Trade Center, we literally work with a community organization there called TCB Youth Mentoring to hire graduates, kids that came out of there that now are looking for employment of legal age, right? Some may or may not have had something on the record, things that Ford Motor Company or other plants might have kicked them out of the door for, right? So that's what I mean when I say literally you have to be intentional about it. And we advertise almost saying, if you have something on the record, we encourage you to apply, right? You can't strictly say we're only going to hire somebody who's got this conviction, but you have to be intentional like that.
Right. Well, I think before we're done, we're going to probably give a time for a few questions, but Rick, my last thing to you is, I just can't imagine back in the 1980s going into prison, the way that you saw government treating people back at that time, and now you're sitting on stage as part of a marijuana company that's legal. I mean, can you kind of talk about what that evolution has been like and what it's like going from behind bars to seeing it how it is today in Michigan?
Listen, sometimes I stand in a dispensary, and it's a little surreal to see people be able to walk in and buy cannabis. When I was home, we went to a weed house, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know, for me it's bittersweet because for years you've punished people, and now they want to take all these tax dollars from it. And, you know, there's so many things in this industry where they hurt this as a business. They say, oh, this is a business, but you can't write off anything. In every other business, you have write-offs, except this industry. If you really recognize this as an industry that's doing good things and helping people, why won't you recognize it as a regular business and let people have these write-offs? So to me, that's, you know, there's an at Lipari Foods, and they already promoted him to a managerial position. So I try and help people through Team Wellness, through Hale and Monaco Law Firm in Chicago, through companies that I work with. I try and give people, you know, other opportunities outside of this world, and I'm fortunate enough to do that. But going back to what you said, like, I can't get back any of the time that I was in prison. And I don't look back. But what I can do from here forward is try and make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to others, and try and help people. I don't call it a handout, I call it a hand up. And a lot of guys out of prison, they don't want to hand out. We're not bums or handicapped or whatever. We just need a hand up in society. You know, don't look down on us because we committed a crime or we did what the government said is a crime. So, you know, sometimes just extend a hand or do something good. You know what I mean? Like the video I was showing you a minute ago. Kevin Henn is my dear friend, like my brother. He was 16 years old. They called him a drug kingpin. Anytime I call Kevin and say I'm doing this, I don't even have to ask him. If I tell him, Kev, I gave 5 G's to this, he sends me $2,500. So we try and do good things together. My opinion is the people that have been through the most give the most. And, you know, my journey, it led me here today. I'm friends, you know, with Rob Sims. I think Rob's a great guy. Many Sundays I got to watch Rob get me through prison and a little football and Calvin, and I love to see that they're in this industry and they're trying to reach back and help people. Yes. You know what I mean? Jerome talked about the Last Prisoner Project. I'm very close with the kids that own Dutchie. Dutchie, I think in four years has a $3.75 billion valuation. They said, listen, whatever you guys raise, which I'm going to work with Rob, and we're going to come up with some things that the first $1 million they're going to match for the Last Prisoner Project. That's putting your money where your mouth is. That's giving back. Like,
all right, how are we doing on time? We're good? We still have some time left for questions? All right, hopefully a couple questions, and there's a mic coming around.
Hello. So, believe it or not, before I was a nurse, I was a paramedic, and I remember those calls to the jails, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, especially for a nonviolent drug offense. My question is simple. Do you believe reparations should be paid for victims of war on crimes, alleged war on crimes? And if you think so, what would reparations look like? What would you want it to look like?
It's funny you said that, because we talk about giving out licenses and the social equity side of things, and we don't give them out. Mm-hmm. If we really want to help people, the state could forgive the fees. Like, if they give you a license, give it to you. If they feel you're deserving of it, let's not say we're going to waive 65% of the fees. Give it out. Let those people have it, and whatever they choose to do with it is it's theirs at that point. If they want to sell it, if they want to partner with someone, I just think there's too much bureaucracy around what's going on. Like, even in the city, we should have been the first to market, and we're last, and it's still screwed up. And it's kind of sad, because I look at Detroit, and I love Detroit, and I love the people of it, and I try and do good things here. But it seems like we always screw things up.
like Rick said, a hand up, not a handout. I think that's the easiest way to give it back, and we have to stop trying to justify the war on drugs. Like saying, oh, well, there were certain parts of it. No, it was terrible. And it's on record, and its intention to literally oppress certain groups of people, right, that didn't support the war, whatever the case was. And so now, when it's said, and you realize that cannabis was actually legal, things I learned, you could buy in the open market. You could buy cannabis tinctures in the early 1900s on the open market, right? It was literally created for a specific purpose. Once you realize that, you have no problem with forgiving fees all the way and giving people a chance, a real chance.
The war on drugs, too, we call it the war on drugs, but it targeted inner cities or, you know, for lack of a better word, it targeted ghettos. It didn't, like, so many of my friends got life sentences. And I was talking the other day, a lot of my friends, you know, came from single family homes. They might have sold an ounce of crack to help their mom feed their 3 brothers and sisters or pay the water bill or keep the lights on. No one wanted to get to a level where we sold pounds of cocaine. It wasn't about that. It was about trying to survive. And I have other friends from different areas, and I've said this live. I have a friend that was indicted in Detroit for 7 tons of cocaine. Nobody in this room knows his name, and he received an 11-year sentence. But as juveniles, we received life without parole. So that's the war on drugs. 7 tons, 11 years, 17 pounds, life without parole.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many stories I wrote, and that's kind of what drew my attention to you, was about people that were committed second-degree murder and things, and many violent.
What do you mean, first-degree murder?
Yeah, that's happened before, sure.
Nate killed 30 people.
Yeah.
He did 17 years because the government allowed him to.
Right.
So if the government says it's okay, it's okay. If the government doesn't say it's okay, it's not okay. But if the government says, oh, you killed 30 people in the ghetto, it's okay, we'll let you out. Nobody cares.
Next time you have people that wonder why they have a problem with cannabis, ask them it's because it's illegal or immoral to them. Just because something's being told to you that was wrong for decades doesn't mean it's actually wrong.
Probably have time for about one more. I think we got 3 to 4 minutes left. Is it? All right. I guess what I'm wondering, now that you're out and you know what the war on drugs did, but where do you see the war is still going on, or is the war over now? I mean,
no, it's not over. Listen, I don't think it'll ever be over because they don't want to do away with those unnecessary jobs in government. What do they do with all these people that they have running, chasing people around? Instead of chasing around child molesters or rapists or all these robberies that are going on, these smash and grabs, like, they're not chasing them around. There's people that died. I saw a security guard died in one of those. They're not chasing them around, but they're chasing kids around that are selling drugs. So I don't think it'll ever go away.
All right. We have a couple more minutes, so and there have been no new questions that have come up here. So what's explain what you're doing with this brand and what your future goals are. I mean, do you have any specific goals like going forward that you want to?
Yeah, we're expanding the brand right now. We hope to get in 2 to 3 other states before the summer's over. So,
You want more question too?
Young lady has a question again.
So right now you're in Michigan and you're trying to expand to
Yeah, hopefully by the end of the summer I'll be in 3 other states.
All right.
So teaching people their 8th Amendment.
So, not quite a question, but a talking point. I loved how you spoke about the FDA. And do you think that there should be some accountability for these individuals who have been orchestrating war on drugs? If you had the power to do so, what would you do?
I mean, the people that are orchestrating them are a lot of our politicians, so I try not to get in politics if I don't have to. Try and straddle that line. I believe in, I don't care what you are. If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. So that's the person that I support. But the people that have been orchestrating it, I think it's like, to be honest, I say it's out with the old and in with the new, and you need some newer ways of thinking, and I don't want to sound like I don't like old people or anything, but I think some of their ways of thinking are just outdated, and we need to change, and we need to go to the polls to change that. And I don't think enough young people vote.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'll add, as cliche as it is, knowledge is power. One of the best ways to fight something that's existed for decades, before many folks were even born in this room, right? And most, for that matter, you have to educate. As I mentioned about cannabis being something that you could legally buy, people didn't know that. I learned recently that in early, I think, settlement Jamestown era days, it was a requirement to grow cannabis for farmers. Like 1700s. Who would have known that? I didn't. Right, a fellow attorney that practices in the area, shared that with me. So we have to use that education, and knowledge is power, right? I mean, I don't know if we'll be able to go at people for the war on drugs. A lot of them aren't even around anymore, if you will, right? Or there's institutions. But with that knowledge, that's the same reason that when you got cannabis on the ballot for the polls, that the reason it passed here in the 2020s and the late 2010s, as opposed to it wouldn't have passed in the 90s, wouldn't have passed in the 80s. So that knowledge and that continued information is a way that we can fight back. We have that awareness, then we take accountability, and we take some action.
All right. Well, thanks a lot to Rick and Jerome. And are you going to lead us into lunch here?
Yes. So, friends, lunch is served. There's a main table back to my left, your right. You guys can just help yourself. We'll be back at 1:05 right back here. One more time for Rick and Jerome, please. Enjoy lunch. Thank you, guys.